Hello and welcome to a Team Moray Robotics event recap. On August 30 and August 31st, I competed at RABID's Immersecon Invasion with my Ant-White combat robot, Moray. Before I get into what happened at the event, I do have some backstory as well as event details to talk about. This RABID event was different from the previous ones because instead of being held at a church, it was held in a hotel conference room at Immersecon, a STEM and gaming convention. It felt a little bit like a tiny Motorama, with the robots being a smaller part of a bigger event. Space was limited and so was the number of robots, so the event was a bit smaller than usual, but I kind of enjoyed this somewhat smaller bracket. The most interesting part of the event is that it was a two-day event, where the first day played out like your usual double elimination tournament, but on the second day, anyone still in the area could come in and have a grudge match in the arena. I did go both days, and I'll talk a little bit more about day 2 when I get to it, but overall the event was fantastic and I had a great time. So now let's talk about Moray. Moray's my main robot, as you might be able to tell, and probably the most well-known of my bots. I started running it a little over a year before this event took place, and it had some success while never becoming a top contender. After an alright but disappointing redesign in May, I took a break from running Moray for a while I built a new robot, Outpost 31, and worked on another full redesign for Moray. Going into this event, it had been 3 competitions in a row where I ran a control bot, so it was refreshing to be able to do damage again. Redesign-wise, the chassis was way wider, with the weapon sticking out super far to make sure there's basically nothing it can't hit. The tiny carbon fiber uprights were replaced by thick TPU ones to help with the durability. The uprights are actually both attached as one piece now, which also bolts into the chassis from 3 different sides to avoid any kind of issue with them failing after the May incident. And for the first time, Moray had a top and bottom plate with a TPU chassis piece in the middle. Testing was promising design-wise, but I ran into issues with my Just Cuz hub motor where it split apart, and I think I broke one after the motor's heat melted the TPU and caused the screws to push too far in. I managed to salvage one, but I was afraid it wouldn't last. The carbon fiber parts didn't arrive in time, so I was forced to use TPU for the top plates and make paper googly eye eel heads. Moray's first fight was against Slug, a robot that I love, but I desperately didn't want to fight. Moray was right at the weight limit, as it usually is, and that means no extra weight for good top armor. That's a problem when your opponent is an overhead saw that can cut through TPU like butter. I decided to use a smaller battery to give me some extra weight to tape some old stuff on to try and stop the saw. There was an old PLA wedge that Goal Line never got to, and 2 old TPU motor covers. When the fight starts, Slug pins me before I even move and drops the saw right into my extra armor, cutting through it. Fortunately, my reach allows Moray's spinner to take chunks out of Slug even while I'm being pinned. I almost get pinned again before I can leave the corner, but the saw misses. Moray maneuvers out of the corner and finds an opening on the side of Slug, which takes some nice chunks out of the wheel guard. Slug goes for another attack, but changes his mind as he doesn't want Moray to hit his fragile saw. He pins Moray head on, but can't bring the saw down without it going straight into Moray's spinner. You can see that Moray's spinner grinds away at the front armor during the pin. I get a small hit, and then Slug continues to bully Moray around with its superior drive and fork setup. He goes for a cut, but my spinner connects enough to push us apart. Slug gets a strong pin, but mostly saws into the kick plate instead of Moray, and if you look closely, you can see a screw that holds its weapon motor back out here. Moray gets pushed around, and then its own weapon is used against it when the spinner collides with the kick plate and flips me over. I should be able to self-right just by driving backwards or running into the wall like usual, but I struggle with that and start choking Slug with my wheel guard. I keep having a hard time getting back upright, and a terrible scenario happens when I get pinned while upside down. My spinner comes down on his top plate, but he saws straight into my unarmored bottom side. But fortunately, it didn't hit anything important inside, and it rights me. Moray gets flipped again right away, but self-rights this time. I find an opening for a small hit to Slug's side, and then get a nice pop to his back corner. Moray again gets to the side and takes some chunks out, making things look a little more promising. I get pinned again with a little bit of sawing, and both robots get thrown back on this exchange. Slug pins Moray and brings the saw down straight into the cut it already made in the TPU armor, and then it gets one more pin before the fight goes to the judges. Moray lost that one, which is absolutely the right call, but it went better than I expected. Both sides of the top plate were sawed through, but nothing inside took any real damage. If I didn't tape 2 TPU blocks onto the left side, that fight almost certainly would have ended sooner, because Slug started to cut into the receiver antenna, but didn't make it far enough to affect its functionality. The battery had its balance charging plug get scratched as well. The bottom side had a cut that went through both the bottom plate and some of the TPU uprights, but there was nothing in that spot to damage. I was pleasantly surprised by how much damage Moray was able to do to Slug's armor. The front left corner was pretty beat up, and the front had a bunch of pieces removed from when I was getting pinned. The right side wheel guard also had a big crack in it. The big issue with this fight was that Moray was extremely slow and hard to drive, and I thought that this was due to using a smaller battery. Now in the loser's bracket, Moray would have to fight Banana Blitz, a 4-wheel drive vertical spinner that uses the same hub motor as Moray. This seemed like it could be a very even matchup. I knew that he was way faster than me, but I probably had a more damaging weapon. I switched back to the bigger battery to hopefully be able to drive better. When the fight starts, neither weapon connects, but when I charge head-on at Banana Blitz, Moray's reach advantage wins me this exchange, throwing my opponent into the air and causing Moray to do a backflip. Banana Blitz tries to spin its weapon back up, but that first hit killed it. I think Thomas said I cut the weapon motor wires. Moray catches the wheel guard and throws the banana bot, and then flips it with a similar hit before landing a shot that rips a fork off and puts a pretty significant bend in Banana Blitz's metal front armor. I get a small hit on the backside and then take a little time to find another good angle. Another really good hit happens, which rights Banana Blitz, and you can see that self-righting was a lot easier for me in this one. Moray's spinner hits the wheel guard and gets jammed in the TPU, which momentarily gets us stuck together before we separate. We get into an odd upside-down pushing match, which ends with a right side up Moray getting pinned by an upside down Banana Blitz, showing that Moray's drive is kind of awful. A small hit causes Banana Blitz to do the thing, and I was ready to take the win here, as you can see from the wobbly gyro dancing, but I changed my mind and keep Banana Blitz in the fight with a hit that gets both bots some airtime. Another hit takes a chunk out of his carbon fiber top plate, I think, and another one flips him back over. I hit him on the backside, which tears up the corner of his top plate, but at this point, Moray's weapon was wobbling worse than it should be, as Caleb notices in announcing.
You see a little bit of wobble on that weapon of Moray.
My fears started to come true as the hub motor was starting to pull apart mid-fight. I was so close to winning this, so I tried to take it a little bit slower and not do anything too crazy. Banana Blitz gets some control in and Moray lands a tiny shot. He rockets himself into Moray's face, which puts him in a not so great position, allowing Moray to get one more hit on the metal backplate before we get stuck together as the fight goes to the judges. It's been a while, but Moray got its first win since returning to the sport. That was a really good showing, with quite a bit of damage being done to Banana Blitz. Moray's drive clearly isn't so great, but the reach advantage and the weapon power mostly made up for that. The hub motor was completely coming apart and shockingly didn't affect Moray's performance. I was able to put it back together, but it's permanently damaged, and I wasn't feeling great about its chances of lasting the whole event. It was able to deliver some really great hits though. Moving on in the tournament, next Moray had to fight Noot, a gyro walker. This means the robot has no wheels and instead rotates its spinner setup in a way that makes it walk using the gyro forces created by the spinner. He was also using the same hub motor as Moray, but he put a beetle weight blade on it. I felt good about this fight because his maneuverability wasn't so great, but I definitely didn't want to get hit by that massive weapon. Also, Battle of the Googly Eyes. When the fight starts, I easily get around to the back and sides of Noot, but I'm not careful enough as it gets a hit on my chassis. Fortunately, the weapon was not up to full speed. Moray connects with his chassis and throws him into the corner and then delivers another hit, which throws Noot pretty high, especially since he got a weight bonus for unconventional locomotion. At this point, the system that makes his weapon setup rotate was broken, so Noot couldn't actually move, but I kept hitting it because the driver was willing to keep going, and I wasn't very worried if it couldn't move. This hit did a little damage to Moray's wheel guard. Moray gets another hit, and I think I know who Thomas was rooting for. I get a surprisingly hard hit that sends Noot flying through the air, and then there's some sparks as Moray wins 2 weapon-to-weapon exchanges. I do some mild grinding against his uprights, and then hit him where he gets propped up against the wall in a way that stops his spinner. Noot taps out and gives Moray the victory. Very little of that fight was against a functional robot, but Moray showed off its weapon, getting a few very solid hits that sent a larger robot up into the air. One of the wheel guards was torn slightly and the chassis had a little bit of damage from that chassis hit, but other than that, Moray was fine. The builder of Noot gave me this big TPU part of the chassis that Moray tore into in multiple places, and it's extremely light and squishy and a very fun trophy. I hope Noot keeps iterating on its design because it's not something you see very often. Now at 2-1, Moray was guaranteed at least an even record no matter the outcome of its next fight. That fight would be against Permanent Marker, a Roach Robotics robot that I was pretty terrified of. It's a dual vertical spinner and it's crazy fast, but the most interesting thing about it is that Casey was running the same chassis in 2 weight classes and swapping the weapon based on which class he was fighting in next. So Trainwreck and Permanent Marker are the same robot, just with different weapons swapped in. Fortunately for me, he couldn't get his spinner to work for the Moray fight after I think Baby Buzz did some serious damage to it. This is great news for me because I wouldn't have to worry about taking any damage. It still wouldn't be easy though because Permanent Marker is durable and extremely well driven. I would say this seemed relatively even going into it, with maybe Moray being favored a bit due to having a functional spinner. When the fight starts, you can tell Casey's driving tactically, trying to avoid Moray's spinner. My spinner nicks his disc and creates some pretty nice sparks, and then Moray hits him right between the discs, sending Permanent Marker flipping through the air. I get pushed around a little and then flip Permanent Marker with another hit before following that up with another one. A hard shot to the bottom of Permanent Marker tears out part of his bottom plate and flips him back over. He gets a good shove into the corner, complete with a fireworks show, and then pins Moray. Moray gets a couple of small hits when Permanent Marker runs into the spinner, but the drive started to feel off. We dance, and then Moray gets violently shoved into the wall for another pin. Upon release, you can definitely tell that Moray is barely able to drive, which allows my opponent to get another very easy pin. I turn in time to connect with his non-functional weapon, which once again flips him over, making it much easier for me to win exchanges. A big hit to the back flips Permanent Marker upright and takes another chunk out of the bottom plate. Moray gets a hit by being shoved into the wall. Moray's weapon's used against it in the corner when I get flipped, and it happens again when the spinner gets bounced into the wall of the arena. There are more very nice sparks, and Moray gets slammed again, giving Permanent Marker more control. At the very end of the fight, Moray flips Permanent Marker one more time, but there isn't enough time to capitalize on this as the fight goes to the judges. I knew this one would be close because I was able to get several hits with Moray's spinner, but Permanent Marker easily had more control and I didn't feel confident that I would win. I ended up being right, sadly, and Permanent Marker did eliminate Moray from the tournament, even without a weapon. I don't know how he managed to go home with trophies in 2 weight classes using the same robot. I'm not too unhappy with how that went because I put up a good fight and it made it clear that the drive needed to be improved, and that was the biggest issue with the robot. In a way, Slug kinda caused me to lose that fight because the reason Moray started driving so poorly is that some wires fell out of the cut caused by Slug earlier in the event and partially high-centered Moray. I was able to do some decent damage to Permanent Marker because Casey gave me this metal rod that I bent. It's the piece that goes inside the drum and in between the 2 discs. Moray was eliminated from the tournament now with a respectable record of 2-2, and I was pretty happy with that. However, this wasn't it because I came back for the next day for some grudge matches. I loved how they had the second day because it was only just a few people and it was extremely casual. You could just go around and ask for grudge matches and there was no time constraint whatsoever. It was an interesting idea and I hope it happens again at some point. The first grudge match I did with Moray was against Synthwave Kit, which is shockingly a Synthwave kit. These kits have 4 really big foam wheels and a relatively small vertical spinner, so I felt like Moray is set up pretty well to take on this kind of robot. And if I could beat this one, I'll feel good if I have to fight any in the future. When the fight starts, Synthwave faces the wall and I take too long, only getting a small hit on the back followed by one on the wheel. By getting a good running start, Moray punts Synthwave into the air, getting one of Moray's best hits to date. A flurry of very visually pleasing hits gets Synthwave propped against the wall before getting gently knocked down. I get what I was hoping to do and start tearing up the wheels in the corner, and Moray rips a belt off as Synthwave drives over the spinner. Some fun gyro stuff happens, and I catch Synthwave in the corner to hit the wheels more, but the driver taps out and gives Moray the win. That was a good showing from Moray and a promising indication of what might happen if I fight a Synthwave kit in the future. I was given some wheel bits with text on them as a trophy. The next grudge match was against Red Whirligig, which is a plastic ant, but wanted to risk it and fight Moray. This isn't the first time we've been in the arena together though, because back at Turkey Brawl, Red Whirligig actually won the full combat ant rumble and was responsible for killing Moray's drive. I was very excited to see what would happen when we hit each other. Oh hey, I think that's Synthwave's belt. When the fight starts, Red Whirligig bounces off Moray, and then the chaos begins when we go weapon to weapon and Moray gets hit back into the kick plate while Whirligig stays stable. After bouncing into the wall, Red Whirligig both takes and delivers a hit, which sends both robots into the air and makes Moray do a backflip. He gets a little jab, then gets hit into the air, but I don't know if Moray's spinner actually made contact here. Then Whirligig proves it can throw itself into the air, and the slow drive on Moray only allowed me to just nick his outer ring. It's like he was taunting me, getting so close to being hit, but I couldn't quite do it. With both weapons at full speed, Moray's tooth gets embedded in the ring of Red Whirligig and we get stuck together. The absolutely absurd power of Red Whirligig spinning its chassis around gets us unstuck and allows the fight to continue. Moray gets popped back and shows off new gyro moves that I did not know I could do. I don't know how this works, but it looks like I just kind of bumped Whirligig and then it shot itself at the wall. Moray makes contact with its spinner, but gets thrown backwards twice. Whirligig gets a great hit off on Moray. Moray's wheel guard feeds Whirligig up into its weapon where we both take a hit, and then in the next exchange, Moray breaks off some red whirly bits, but I get thrown farther. I get thrown across the box and into the kick plate before a few smaller exchanges without anything too crazy happening. I corral Whirligig in the corner and get hit face first into the kick plate. After a little while of chasing down my opponent, Red Whirligig hits Moray's chassis and causes some wires to stick out. One more hit to that same spot kills Moray's drive, knocking it out. Well, Moray got gigged again. Just imagine what the full combat Dread Whirligig would do. That fight was a lot of fun. It was really hard to deliver proper hits against something so chaotic, even if it was titanium on plastic. I did do some damage to the teeth of his ring, and the builder Weston actually gave me the ring as a trophy, which is one of the coolest fight trophies I've received. You can see the infill through the gaps here, and then this little slit right there is where Moray's disc dug in when we got stuck together, and it still actually fits pretty snug in the hole. This fight exposed a major flaw of the design, which is that the corners of the chassis and the top plate that are by the uprights were not screwed together at all. This was a huge and very obvious oversight when I was designing this version, and that's why I had to hold everything together with electrical tape for the whole event. This made it easy for Red Whirligig to break something inside. The problem was the drive ESC, but I don't know exactly what was wrong with it. It just didn't work anymore. Moray's final fight of Immersecon was against Sparky, a full combat ant with the chunkiest vertical spinner I've ever seen. It's just a block of metal. This ended up being the very last fight of the event, and by now we were used to fighting Sparky after fighting it with two other robots. Sparky is fittingly a Team Sparkbotics robot. When the fight starts, we go weapon to weapon, and Moray gets gently flipped. Nothing crazy happens besides some sparks in the next exchange, but then Sparky flips Moray onto its weapon, which bounces it into the corner. Moray's disc carves some material out of Sparky's top plate. Then I flip him going weapon on weapon. Sparky slides around on its spinner, and when it hits the wall, it bounces around and then lands straight on top of Moray's disc. This hit cracked his top plate and gave Moray a tap-out victory for its final fight. It was a short but memorable battle. The left upright was scratched, and more importantly, the eel head was damaged. Douglas, who built Sparky, gave me the cracked top plate, which Moray did quite a bit of damage to. On that big hit, Moray hit Sparky's battery and dented it, but it fortunately didn't catch on fire, even though that would have been a cool end to the event. Well, that's it. If you count the second day, Moray went 4-3, which is the first time it's done better than 2-2, but since the second day wasn't an official tournament, I don't count this as the first time it's ended with a positive record. Still, this was a great event and a very solid return for Moray. I needed to improve the drive significantly, and I had my eye on the Roach Robotics wheels for better traction. I also needed to screw down the corners of the floppy chassis. Other than that, I really like the shape of the new Moray, and especially how the weapon stuck out so far. Some other Team Moray robots showed up at this event, so I'll cover them next, but Moray has competed again, so you have that to look forward to. Thank you for watching this event recap.